Each of these practices build the 4 separate skills you need in order to speak. Once you combine them, real conversations will get easier and easier. So you want to speak a new language, right? Like you actually want to speak it, probably more than write it. If you're anything like myself and thousands of other people, the 2 to 4 years of Spanish grammar study or French grammar or whatever language in high school and maybe in college probably didn't get you ready to have conversations. Why? Well, because you didn't practice real conversations or the preliminary skills necessary to have them. And before you click away from this video, remember, everyone who already speaks a language can learn to speak a new one. So don't let a bad experience convince you otherwise. Hi everyone, and welcome to Lingua Carpa. I'm Carp, language tutor and teacher for over 12 years. Today, I want to help you speak better in your target language, whatever that language is. Let's get started. There are 4 needs we have to understand first. These are the needs to be able to speak acceptably in your target language. The first need is sufficient acquired language from sufficient input. That is to say, you need to have built the target language system in your brain so that you have stuff to use. You need to have the words and the structures in your brain before you can access them. If I wanted to talk about the zoo, for example, I would have to already have some knowledge on animals and environmental vocabulary in my target language. So remember, you cannot make bricks without clay, and you can't produce language that you haven't acquired yet. The second need is sufficiently correct pronunciation. Let's face it, your target language probably has some phonemes, the different sounds in a language, that you aren't used to. You have to be able to pronounce these sounds well enough that your conversation partner can understand you. Need number 3 is sufficient fluency. Does it take you 15 whole seconds to think of 2 words? That's not gonna cut it. Not that it has to be ultra fast, but if you can't speak quickly enough and steadily enough, you'll be harder to understand. Your brain, mostly unconsciously, has to be able to retrieve the language you need quickly enough for you to converse. Need number 4 is being sufficiently relaxed. Are you someone who freezes up in the face of an impending conversation in your new language? It's okay, it's normal at first, but some people have all of those other needs met and then they get to this and, well, kind of freak out. If you get too stressed, your brain will falter in things you can normally do without a problem, so we'll have to address that as well. So we have our 4 needs for speaking, but what can we actually do about them? Let's address what practices you can use for each one. Each of these practices build the 4 separate skills you need in order to speak. Once you combine them, real conversations will get easier and easier. To address our first need of sufficient acquired language, we need to get more input, both general and specific. General input continually offers a wide variety of new language, while specific input lets us target things we know we want to talk about or need to talk about. For example, if you haven't watched or listened to anything about how to order your favorite drink in a cafe in your target language, there's no way you'd just magically know how to do that. So keep getting general input as part of your language study and seek specific input on the topics you want to be able to talk about. To address sufficiently correct pronunciation, we can practice pronunciation in isolation, free from the pressures of live conversation. Here are a few ways to do that. First is shadowing. That is, listening to small pieces of audio, then pausing the audio so that you can copy it out loud. This is the best way to practice pronunciation in isolation because you get to hear how that thing is supposed to sound right before you get to practice it for yourself. That means you're also getting some good listening practice in the process. Another way is to follow pronunciation guides for challenging sounds, like the Spanish R, for example. That one tends to be difficult for a lot of native English speakers. Sometimes if a sound is particularly tricky, it's not enough just to try to mimic the sound, and you need a bit more targeted advice on maybe how to make it with your mouth. Getting those little pieces of advice can be very helpful. And lastly, you can read text aloud. This is better for intermediate learners because you should already have decent pronunciation in the target language with familiar words, but reading novel text will help you practice pronunciation on the fly, especially as you come across unfamiliar words, and you get some reading practice in the process. To address sufficient fluency, we can practice recall or retrieval by speaking to yourself out loud. Time yourself speaking on a specific topic, like movies, a sport, travel, anything really, for 2 to 5 minutes. And I recommend you try doing this with no resources in front of you. Your goal is to speak the entire time, and it's okay if you're really choppy at first. That's to be expected. Pretend you're either giving a presentation to a small group or maybe explaining something to a friend. It's very important to keep a potential audience in mind because that will influence the words that you choose and the level of formality that you choose while speaking. As an added bonus, practicing recall on specific topics will help you expose knowledge gaps that you have on that topic, and then you can go and fill in those knowledge gaps with additional input later. And lastly, to address being sufficiently relaxed. If you have already worked on the other 3 needs, you've already done everything you can to be as ready as possible to start actually speaking. Then you simply have to start talking, and you have to practice abundantly. Just like with anything else, the more you practice it, the easier it's going to get and the less intimidating. By simply speaking with more and more people over time, it will naturally become easier to do. One of the best ways to improve your speaking abilities in a less intimidating environment is, of course, with a tutor. That's right. If you're learning Spanish, French, or English and want to improve your language, I can help. Click the link in the description below to schedule a session with me. It is quick and easy to get scheduled, and we can work on whatever you like or whatever you need in your sessions. Anything from conversational practice to homework help for a language class. And there is no long-term commitment. You can schedule a lesson once, or you can come back and schedule more if you like it. It would be my pleasure to work with you and help you on your language journey. And that's all for today's video. I hope that identifying the needs and the components of speaking give you a clear idea on what to work on and how to improve. And please remember to be patient with yourself and celebrate the small victories. I guarantee that most of you are a lot harder on yourself about how well you speak than any conversation partner will ever be. So just take it easy and try. If you're someone who's already made use of specific practices to improve your speaking in a new language and you'd like to share that with the rest of the community, I would appreciate that. And that way you can learn from one another on things that you've had success with and help everyone improve in their language learning. Thanks for watching. Keep on learning, everybody, and I'll see you in the next one.